Hello and welcome to the Extreme Cinema Podcast with me, Alexander Sternberg, and Dom Loach. How's it going, Dom?
It's going well. How are you, Stenny?
It's good. Welcome to this slightly impromptu episode.
Oh, yeah, well, we should tell the story of how this one came to be, I guess.
Because today's film is Andrzej Żuławski's Possession from 1981, and this week was meant to be The Devils, which you would have heard last week, but I was fortunate enough to get to go see this in the cinemas, and I was like, hey, this works for the podcast pretty perfectly, and it was absolutely amazing seeing it in the cinema. And Prano Bailey Bond, who directed fucking Censor, fantastic film. Everyone go and watch Censor; it's amazing. Gave an introduction when she was reading correspondence from the BFI archives about Possession, and it was absolutely insane, which I'll mention later on.
I did not know that. You didn't tell me about that bit.
Oh, I forgot it was a thing. I wanted to say hi to her at the bar before, but she was clearly networking with people and chatting to a ton of people. I was like, I'm not gonna push my way through. But I adored Censor. I thought it was just a terrific film.
Yeah, you should have pretended you were important.
Hello,
I am Mr. Film Man.
How do you do?
I have a podcast, every white man has ever said to her.
Hello, would you like to go on my podcast? Oh, that's the third time I've been told this week. That film has totally changed the discourse back to video nasties for the last month, which is very convenient because of the podcast.
It's very nice for us. I've not even seen Censor yet, but it's very nice for us.
You're gonna adore it. But yeah, I think Possession, which is a video nasty, and it's probably the most unusual video nasty, would you not say?
Oh, easily. It's the most artsy video nasty as well. The most actual film video nasty out of them all.
The most intentionally incomprehensible one.
Oh my god, yeah. I only watched it today, and I'm still trying to comprehend what any of it was.
I mean, yeah, it was so good in the cinema. The screen was sort of packed out. We had to book tickets a bit in advance, and the intensity, it was just it starts and you're just glued to the screen the second it begins.
Yeah, it's crazy because you messaged me after you'd seen it and were like, that was such an experience, and I'd not watched it yet. So I was watching it oh my god, imagine this in the cinema, Jesus Christ.
And what's really great about this film is, ultimately, it's about the collapse of a marriage, and the similarities between this and the first film we've done, Antichrist, there's a lot of them.
Oh, it's so close to Antichrist, the theming and everything. I mean, maybe not as strong as Antichrist theme-wise, and it's not as artsy, even though it kind of is. It's a very weird film to try and comprehend it all.
Well, I think it's quite slightly impenetrable, especially some of the themes around faith are just what even is this? But this is one of those films which I don't say about many films. Lynch is my favorite director. I wouldn't really say this about any of Lynch's films even, but it's a work of utter madness. Andrzej Żuławski has to be fucking mad, right? You don't make this film unless you're actually mental.
Oh, yeah. Some of the scenes are just unbelievable. I mean, I remember reading actor testimonies just this is the hardest thing I've done. Sam Neill said he'd never go that far again or that extreme.
Oh, I could imagine. It's such a weird script though. The way everyone speaks so theatrically, and you have a complete understanding of everyone's emotion. I mean, really, you have an understanding of everyone's emotion, but you have an understanding of what's going on, what they're saying, and everything. But at a lot of points in the film, and it gets more and more like this the further you go along, they're not really speaking like human beings.
No, not even a little bit. It's so weird. I think that's the thing. This film is just weird and utterly insane. It's the closest film I've seen to just depicting madness, like utter. You have no idea what's going to happen, like at any point.
Totally. It's weird and utterly insane, but because it's about this sort of collapse of this marriage and the end of the world and these two very human people, you can like totally follow it and totally get like very emotionally engaged in it.
Oh yeah, especially like the first half is like, I mean, it's still mental, but it is like this collapse of a marriage kind of idea.
And a lot of it takes place in these flats, and everyone. One thing I really like about the film is sort of every flat has its own personality. Like you've got their kind of quite boring, very flat with all the rooms, and then you've got Heinrich, who's my favorite character, who's nuts and speaks like a crazy person. He's like big, luxurious flat, and then you have the flat in Kreuzberg where the thing is that's sort of dank and horrible, and that I mean my girlfriend pointed out to me when we were watching it, like, she's pretty sure we stayed very close to where this actual flat was when we were staying in Berlin, so it's now, like, a lot nicer of an area.
Oh wow, really? That's so cool. Just like, oh, I was near the terrifying monster thing.
The terrifying from Possession. I love Berlin. I just love Berlin, the city, and I love the setting of being, like, right next to the Berlin Wall, because it's got that, like, political element to it with sort of Sam Neill being a spook and whatnot. And I really love that setting. They look out their flat and they can see the, East German patrol, guards with their binoculars. It's very, very evocative.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's supposed to be quite a political film as well, isn't it? Like, a lot of subtext in there. I mean, I think they said that deliberately chose Berlin just because of the political subtext and everything.
Do you think it's, a political film, or do you think the politics is subtext for the marriage? I mean, like, because, the end of the world happens at the end, World War III, but that's clearly paralleled in the marriage. So do you think this is trying to say something about, Cold War tension through a marriage, or is the Cold War tension talking about the marriage, or neither, or both?
Honestly, probably both.
We're good on this
podcast. We're so good. It's like you said, with like the two different apartments as well, like the old abandoned house and then the really nice house. It's like west and east almost, and the fucking nuclear apocalypse at the end. It's very
that final shot.
Yeah, no, it's very political, but also, like you say, that could just be through this marriage. It's very.
I think we gotta talk about the acting. Isabelle Adjani winning Best Actor at Cannes for this. Obviously, this is like a powerhouse performance. This is terrifying on all fronts, and I adore Sam Neill, but like, this has got to be my favorite Sam Neill performance, and I love Jurassic Park, and I really do like Event Horizon. I know. But my God, and Hunt for the Wilder People, but this is it. And Isabelle Adjani, like, oh my God.
Well,
how does one do all this?
It's like the only thing I'd ever seen of this film before I watched it was her freaking out in the subway. Like, that scene is, I think loads of people have seen that scene and not even know what it is. Just her having that mental breakdown and screaming, and it's unreal. Like, how does somebody push themselves to that? Like,
yeah, that miscarriage scene. Like,
yeah.
I could imagine someone watching that and going, "Oh, that's just, she's just screaming for 5 minutes and banging about the place in the subway. That's like nothing." No, she's pushing her body to like 11, and there's like intent and choreography behind that, and like the intensity she must have to do, and that is basically one take.
Sterny,
a lot of the film is basically a lot of long takes.
It is, yeah. You know how we love insane like parallels on this podcast? I have one for you.
Yeah, yes, do it.
And I will explain myself, but the scene that her screaming and like throwing herself around and how intense it is reminds me so much of the pie eating scene from A Ghost Story. It's ridiculous.
Okay, I'm done. The Extreme Cinema podcast is now over. Thank you very much.
That's it. We can't carry on.
We're done. The pretentious level is through the roof.
It is, yeah.
Okay. No, like, go right ahead, please.
I think it's just the way in it's two actresses pushing the bodies, and it's obviously it's two ends of the spectrum. Like Rooney's Mara's is this grounded, realistic, like show of depression, and this is like this other side of the spectrum of like throwing yourself around and screaming for 5 minutes and losing it. But it just kind of reminds me of it on that it is two ends of the different spectrum kind of thing.
I totally get it. I totally get it. Yeah, it works. I mean, that scene is, yeah, it's horrifying. And you know, there were some people in the cinema. It happens a lot at old horror movie screens. You get kind of a couple people giggling in the back. No one was at this.
Oh, really?
Absolutely no one was.
I've seen that kind of thing before where it's like a scene like that. You will get people even usually uncomfortably laughing and stuff like that. So it's crazy that there was none.
Absolutely none. Like, and also what I loved is the bit where she cuts herself with the meat cutter. Like, someone literally just screamed at the top of their lungs outside. I love that.
Oh, did they actually? Yeah. I love that.
It doesn't happen that often, a physical scream, but it's great.
Yeah, but the acting is just unbelievable. I think that's what separates this from
Sam Neill as well.
Yeah, separates it from so many of the video nasties we look at.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, what like, really? I mean, nothing's anywhere near this level. I mean, more just because there's so much to talk about the acting. Like, there's Isabelle Adjani. There's the ballet scene, which is actually, I think, the most horrific thing in the film for me. Was that ballet scene, and she's forcing that girl to stand upright.
Oh yeah, it is.
She's crying.
It is horrible.
And the acting, and it's shot so beautifully. Like, all of this film is shot. And the other bit, which is another thing people have seen because of the Every Frame a Painting essay on editing, is after Sam Neill hits her, and she's like basically almost looking at the camera, which is such a rule break, and it holds on her face for 24 seconds after. Like, that is powerful acting.
Yeah, it's just incredible. Like all of it, like, because video nasties get put in such a subcategory because it was like, oh, this was banned along with the video nasties. This is going to be like the Driller Killer or something, and it's called Possession. So people are just going to be like, oh, this is some kind of like cheap ass possession movie, like, and it's so much more than any of that. I mean, nobody even gets possessed, like.
Well, after we came out, Zara was like, "Why even was that a video nasty?" I'm like, "I'm pretty sure it's when she's having sex with the monster, and that's it."
That's what it's got to be, yeah.
But like, that's one of the things that's so baffling about the whole scandal is they seem to have picked 70 gruesome films out of a hat. Like, there's a mix of like lowest common denominator, like Z-grade horror, like, you know, Love Camp 7, Don't Go Into the Woods Alone. Our next week pick as well. A mix of that, a mix of like European giallo slasher horror that's also a bit grim, but like, you know, fairly, you know, mainstream for the horror genre. Or at least for sort of B horror and underground horror. Then sort of films that were completely past uncut, like Evil Dead, and weren't a problem before, now was. And artsy shit like Possession and The Witch Who Came From the Sea. It's like just a hodgepodge, you know, like no thought into it.
Yeah, exactly. It was literally just let's ban these things that we've heard of, basically, and like
a slight digression. But I always go on like pages for censorship and whatnot for researching these episodes. And I scrolled to like the bottom of sort of films associated with the video nasty era. And there's a film which I'd never heard of before called The Funhouse, not Funhouse by Toby Hooper. And it said, note, this was probably the intended target when they went after Funhouse by Toby Hooper. And I was like, wow, the absolute incompetence.
That's incredible. I mean, it was just all incompetence, wasn't it? Like, let's ban some films. Did you hear about the American cut of Possession that they made?
Yeah, okay, I guess we'll talk censorship for a bit before going back into the filmmaking. Yep, over 1/3 of its runtime sliced out.
Yeah, cut a third and made it into like a body horror, like completely getting rid of all the themes. Like it's amazing.
So basically, if you saw this in America in a cinema, you didn't watch the film. Like, you just didn't see Possession.
No, you saw some bastardized version of it that cut out all the themes of like anything to think about. Like cut the marriage stuff completely, which is what the film is intended to be about.
But this is what baffles me about it on the UK censorship front. Is like, what fucking teenager, right, is picking up a VHS of Andrzej Żuławski's Possession, putting it in the video player, and watching through 80 minutes of domestic drama to get to the bit where she kills someone.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Like, it's just so not an exploitation film. It's just not an exploitation film, flat out.
Well, no, it's not exploitation at all. Like, what? It's not even close.
And, like, it was one of those instances where it was passed uncut by the BBFC, but then when the video nasty scandal happened, because of that one 10-second bit, it's now on the list, and it's ridiculous. And it was only passed uncut in 1999, and the correspondence that Prano Bailey Bond was reading out before it, a lot of the BBFC people were very aware it was an excellent film, or that it had merit, but they were still very iffy about it, even though they did pass it.
Yeah, because it was like, even at the time, it was getting great. I mean, it had some detractors, but it was getting amazing reviews. People been like, this is bonkers, but it's so incredibly done and shows some incredible stuff. So for them to ban it,
like, you don't get like something premiering at Cannes. And when Salo was going through all this, there's like so much to talk about on Salo censorship. There was, because it was a Pasolini film, there was such an awareness of how this would look. In the correspondence on that, there is, you know, I can't remember who said, I think it's actually James Herman from the BBFC says this. It's like, we're going to look so bad if we ban this film. Like, only Ireland in the EU has banned it. Every other country hasn't. And we're going to look terrible if we do that.
Yeah.
But there was none of that.
Which is crazy.
They're doing a 4K restoration, and like, I definitely want a copy of this on Blu-ray. Hands down.
Oh, absolutely. After seeing it, like, it's a beautiful film as well. Like, it's very blue.
Well, that's what. The real star of the film, in my eyes, is the camera work. I mean, this is the kind of camera work I adore. I like, and like the settings as well, and it makes so much harder in pre-production, like having these camera shots that sort of still for a while and then just suddenly follow someone out of a building, like down the staircase. That's one of my favorite shots in the film, is when he's fighting and she runs out of the house, and the camera goes from being really still to like running at the top speed down the staircase and then out the house. Like, to find a location where you have, like, you want to use the entire location like that, that takes a lot more effort than just building a film set, but it really just adds to the world. It adds to the grit of it. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, it is incredible. I knew when I was watching that scene that, I mean, I adored it, but I knew you would talk about it. Because that
Dom knows what I like.
Yeah, the camera work in that is unbelievable.
The scene where they're talking at the cafe as well, when then they can't even look at each other, which, you know, the long takes letting the acting do its work, but then when Sam Neill goes nuts and there's a film builds, it just gets more and more and more.
Yeah, it's an intense film, to say to downplay it to a ridiculous degree.
But it's got a sense of humor as well, which is really like you know, in that scene, Sam Neill and all the chefs jump on him and whatnot. It's got a sense of humor that kind of, it's not laugh out loud funny, but it lands despite how intense the film is. Like, Heinrich is hilarious.
Oh yeah, Heinrich. I mean, I think, like you said, I think he's my favorite character as well. I was very sad when he died. I hated how he died as well.
I love that Sam Neill's a spy and he can just do all this shit. I mean, when he rocks up to the flat in Kreuzberg in the like white, like pristine white like suit, it's just so funny.
Yeah, it's
just so funny.
And that's those lines.
And the way he talks, like, this is like the most over exaggerated thing ever.
Yeah, I mean, that has to be on purpose. Like all of because everything
Oh,
is completely over exaggerated.
well, tell me if this is a really weird thing to say, but like this film is so dangerously close at points to being terrible.
Oh yeah, it's like one of those where it gets like draws a fine line between what is incredible and obviously purposely done, and what is purposely done but still terrible.
Kind of like Mulholland Drive in a way, I'd say.
Yeah, very Lynchian.
Lynch must have loved this film, is a guess of mine, but he must have. I mean, when I make this comparison to Mulholland Drive, Lynch being my favorite director, I'm like, I really mean it. This is an outstanding film, and it was better on a second watch, and it was crazy in the cinema, particularly as I think I watched it very poor quality at the time, and I was watching it in my halls of residence in first year of uni, and I was just praying no one walked in.
I could imagine. Oh my!
In the kitchen, I was like, no, please, no one come in, and I have to explain.
I remember watching films in your kitchen as well at uni. I cannot imagine watching Possession in that kitchen. Just
like, I was watching Francis Ha one time, and someone came in and thought it was the most like pretentious artsy thing they'd ever seen from 2 minutes of it, which that's their fault. But for this, I wouldn't blame them.
yeah, they'd have probably died if they'd have walked in at some of the scenes on Possession.
Like that scene where she's having sex with monster, I literally said out loud the first time I saw it to like no one, because it was just me like, what the actual fuck?
Yeah, it's fucked up. Also, is the monster real, Sterny?
Oh, well, it's obviously kind of morphing into like something that, you know, the idealized version of a partner. I mean, I guess so. So much happens around it that it's clearly real. I mean, it's obviously a metaphor. I think the main theme of the film is you know, it's not just a breakdown of the marriage, and that's being paralleled by the end of the world, but it's like they both want their like super idealized partners, and for that, it's for Isabelle Adjani, it's this monstrous, you know, thing that morphs into Sam Neill at the end, that can, you know, sexually satisfy her and whatnot. And for Sam Neill, it's the school teacher who, you know, does the dishes and whatnot.
Exactly, yeah.
Looks after the kids.
It's that idea of the doppelganger, isn't it? Like both of them die, but then get replaced.
Or that's very Blue Velvet, isn't it?
That's incredibly Blue Velvet. Like people getting replaced, and
and Lost Highway.
I was just about
and
to
Mulholland
say,
Drive.
and Lost Highway. Yep. Lynch had to have loved this. Like,
and Aljani pulls off that dual performance so well, and so does Sam Neill when Sam Neill pops up at the end. I mean, that's a great reveal. That
it is. It getting morphed into him is incredible.
I mean, the film gets like quite incomprehensible towards the end. I mean, the end. This is another example of it's so close to being bad when Sam Neill's just murdering everyone. Like that could go terribly.
I love how he just starts killing everyone.
Have you seen the movie May?
I've not seen May, actually, no.
The first two acts or act and a half's really good, and it goes completely over the line where she starts murdering everyone and you don't believe it. You believe it, and even though it's completely absurd and he kills people in these very crazy, precise ways, it's just, you're still hooked and engaged in the film because of the directing and the performances and because of the atmosphere and the completely weird tone the film has throughout.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it did throw me off guard a little when he just started killing everyone, but that is the thing, it didn't make it go off the deep end ridiculous. Like, I was still in there.
The special effects are really good as well. I mean, the monster effects, the kind of body horror effects, like in the miscarriage scene, explosion, all really well done.
Yeah, super well done for. I'm assuming it was like
what do we
low budget, right? 2.4 million for
2 million-ish.
Yeah. So not like crazy low budget.
What do you think of the like spiritual themes, the twin sisters of faith and chance or whatnot? Because I gotta say, I cannot make heads nor tails of it. Yeah, it's clearly really important. I mean, the scene where Heinrich's mother kills herself, that's like clearly like Żuławski clearly thinks that's the most important scene in the film, but I can't make heads or tails of where these play into the rest of the film.
I am exactly the same, because that's another Antichrist parallel. But it's so much easier to understand in Antichrist where it's coming from. in this, I could not have a clue what any of it is. Like, it's not my vibe anyway, usually, with things, but trying to figure out, didn't have a clue.
Like, I feel like it was sort of, here and there mentioned, then, like, Isabel Arjani's character's at the church, and then, like, you have the big subway freak out, and it's like, okay, there's something being said here, and she's talking about these twin sisters or whatever, and I'm lost. I'm sure it makes sense in Żuławski's head.
Oh, yeah, it definitely does. Well, I watched it and then was reading about it, and it was like, and the director had just got divorced, and I was like, well, of course.
Yeah, I was literally just about to mention that.
Of course he did. Like, that makes so much sense. Like,
well, again, Antichrist parable. Lars von Trier was depressed, and Żuławski was going through a divorce.
Yeah, it's the most, like, fuck you wife thing I've ever seen. Like,
you could do a nice little marathon. You could put Kramer versus Kramer, then Possession, then Marriage Story.
Oh my god. Like,
the whiplash.
You definitely want to die by the end of it, but...
There's one more aspect. I feel we mention this in almost every episode, because all these films, even the bad ones, not always the bad ones, but sometimes the bad ones, have this in common: really good music.
Yeah, always. Like, it's just the fucking 80s, isn't it? Like, the good music, it's just the 80s. Like,
I find it so weird that I listen to virtually every genre of music except for electronic. Like, Atari Teenage Riot would be, like, the exception to that, and I like the instrumentals behind Death Grips, but that's kind of it. But I love electronic movie scores. I love John Carpenter scores, and I love this, and I love the score from, like, Solaris as well. Like, it's so good.
Yeah, same. I mean, that's the thing, because, like, obviously you mentioned Carpenter. That's how I know it mostly. And I listen to a bit more electronic than you, but again, it's my least known genre at all. But then I listen to it in films and I adore it.
Like, it just, those opening shots of, like, Berlin with the theme, and it the music's done by Andrzej Korzenitzky. Sorry,
I was waiting for you to try and pronounce it.
I apologize. But, like, it just sets the tone so well, and at the end, when it's, like, really powerful, when Sam Neill's, like, escaping out the roof after the big shootout, it hits so good.
It does, yeah. It adds as it always does, adds an amazing, like, intensity level to it, and just, it's great, as along with everything in this film. I mean, could you think of anything bad to say about this film? I guess the fact that it nearly leans into bad at points, but that almost makes it even better.
It's more fascinating. What can I say? What can I say bad about Possession? It's the ADR kind of sucks. You can kind of tell a lot of the scenes are dubbed over, but also it adds to the weirdness in a way.
Yeah, well, I think it is one of those films as well where it's like, anything that happens, you can even be like, it just adds to the insanity, though. Like, it almost gets a hall pass for it just being utterly mental, and that is such a favour for it. Like,
it's kind of like Suspiria in that way, that film's flaws just, like, it doesn't matter that some people really can't act in the film. It just makes it even weirder.
Exactly.
Even everyone acts in this great.
Yeah, that's the thing. But everybody acts incredibly in this, so it's even hard to point out flaws that might add to that. Like, it's just a fantastic movie.
Who would you recommend this to? Who would, like, it's somewhere between everyone should watch this and absolutely no one should watch this.
It's somewhere there. Like, it's somewhere on that spectrum. People who...
I think if you're a fan of movies of, like, David Cronenberg and David Lynch, that kind of ilk, you will like this. Well, that's
the thing. I was going to say, if you're a movie fan, definitely. And then when it gets further, like, definitely Lynch. Like, if you like Lynch stuff, watch this. This is, I'd say, more fucked up than Lynch. Doesn't get quite as cerebral as Lynch. It's more insane than cerebral, but it's amazing.
I think, I mean, it's obviously not, it's not as cerebral and thought-provoking as Lynch, but I think this is probably more difficult to watch than, I mean, than like most of Lynch's work, because it really is so out there. Like, the tone and script and, you know, a lot of the film's yelling and stuff, it is pushing that line, and I love it.
Yeah, exactly. I adore it too. It sounds like we've just been like going on about how much we love it, but this film is fantastic. Like, I went into it today not really having a clue what to expect, and it blew me away way more than I thought it would.
It was the same with me when I first watched it. I'm like, I was aware this was not, you know, Cannibal Ferox. I was aware it was a somewhat serious film, but I was like, oh, I did not expect this.
No, exactly. But I think that's the like definite final message of the film is it's very unexpected. Like,
do we have any more final thoughts? Or I think that kind of summed it
yeah, I
up.
think we did.
It's brilliant.
Just watch it. Like, if you're listening to this, you probably want to watch it. So just watch it.
So next week we've gone from the best video nasty to one of the worst, haven't we?
Yeah, we've got to one of the worst. We will be watching Snuff.
We're going to be watching Snuff, which is, I mean, think of a bad splatter film. It's worse than that.
Yeah, so look forward to that one.
It's hilarious at points, not intentionally.
Get ready for us to rip a film apart rather than love it, like we usually do.
Well, that's the thing. We had another sort of artsy thing planned, which we're going to do after Snuff, but because we slid Possession in here, we're putting in a bit of trash just to even it out.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we got two more good ones on the way.
We can't always be loving films. So.
Okay, thank you so much for listening, everyone.
Thank you, bye.
You've been listening to the Extreme Cinema Podcast with Alexander Sternberg and Dom Loach. If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider subscribing, as it really helps us out. The original artwork for the podcast was done by George Arnold. The Extreme Cinema Podcast, available where all good podcasts are available.